My name is Matt Abel. I'm going to show you how to change heaters on an ECDDR unit in Pure Humidifier. First things first, you're going to want to drain the tank down, and you're actually going to leave the power on in this process so that you can shut off your fill line and drain the tank down. And then once the tank's drained down, you're going to close the drain, fill it back up with cold water, and then drain it down again. So in order to drain the tank, you'll actually shut off the fill line, and then that'll be field installed shut-off valve, and then you'll come down into this section here, and there's actually a manual lever for the EC. You'll actually probably want to have some gloves for this when the tank's hot, but there's a manual lever that you just pull over and push down and lock it into position. It'll probably take 10 minutes or so to drain the tank down. So once the tank's drained down, you're going to close that fill valve again, fill it back up, and then drain it down again. If you can work with it while hot, you can skip the step of filling it back up. But if it's in a tight spot and you're not comfortable with it being hot, then you're going to want to cool it down by filling it back up and draining it back down again. So once the tank is drained down, you can actually shut off your power, and you're going to want to lock out and tag out. So here I have the power shut off, so I'm going to put a lockout tag, the lockout, and lock this at the breaker. Or if you have a shut off at the unit, you can do it there. So we got the unit locked out, so now we have, basically we're just going to pull the stainless steel tank out of the unit. We've got to remove it in order to pull the cover off. So the whole tank is going to slide out. First things first, you're actually going to disconnect your steam outlet on top here. So you loosen up that hose clamp and pull it off. And slide your hose out of the way. So once we have that loosened, we can actually pull the whole tank out a little bit farther. You don't want to pull it out too far, it'll slide out. And then there's a few connections that we have to do. There's a drain connection, a hose connection on this side. There's an overflow connection right here. We've got the electrical connection right here, which you're going to disassemble right at the box and remove the conduit from the top of the humidifier tank. There's also a secondary electrical connection right here, which I can do that right now. You just need a screwdriver. You're going to need a short little stubby screwdriver to get into these screws on the side of this box, junction box. So you're going to pull that cover off. And once you pull that cover off, there's going to be two Molex plugs. You're going to have a drain plug, tooth plug, and then you're going to have a plug that plugs into the side of the board. So you can disconnect those. Once you got those off, you see this is connected to the tank. Set that aside. Then you actually pull the cover, electrical cover here. Just going to loosen those nuts. Put that out on the side. Set it aside. So we're just worried about getting the electrical connections right now, so there's actually going to be 2 or 3 leads depending on if you have 2-phase or 3-phase. I'm just going to disconnect the wires coming through from the conduit. So just loosen up the nuts, the electrical connections. They're ring connectors, so I just have to pull the nut all the way off. Easiest way to get this off is actually just to use a screwdriver and turn it loose. So we got that off. And we can pull the wires through. Set the wire nut aside, or the retaining nut. Alright. We also have a water connection we have to remove, so in order to remove that, I'm actually just going to loosen the hose clamp on that. It's a barb connection. So just loosen the hose clamp on that, and that'll allow me to twist the connection out. So the hose is going to remain attached to the barb connection. You're just loosening it so the hose can slide inside of the barb connection. Here's the drain connection, and a little trick for these connections is you want to break the seal. You want to break the seal that the rubber has on the metal. So you just kind of loosen up your hose clamp generously. So the hose clamp's loose, and then you can use a screwdriver to kind of break that seal in there. And that will allow you to pull the hose off. A little bit of a twisting motion. There we go. So I got that hose off. Now we just have the overflow hose on the right. Right here. So I'm getting breaking the seal all the way around. Give it a little twist. And there it comes out. Alright, so now I've got the tank completely disconnected. So once again, if it's in a tight spot, you might need another person. If it's not in a tight spot, you should be able to pull it out on your own. So just pull the tank out. We're actually going to set it over. Bring it over to a workbench. Now we're going to take the cover off of the EC unit, and we're going to remove the heaters and replace the heater. So in order to take the cover off, there's just 4 cover clamps. There is just quick disconnect clamps. You just got to loosen them up enough, and then you can just pull them off like that. So pull it off. So there's going to kind of be a little bit of a seal break here. I'm actually going to pull the jumpers off of the heaters here so we can pull them out eventually. So this size. You'll see there's 3 jumpers here. One's a wire jumper, there's 2 copper jumpers. This is for a 3-phase unit, so this is the way it's going to be once you reconnect it and put the new heaters in. So pull the jumpers off, set those aside. All right, now we can pull the cover off, so it's going to, might have a little suction on there, so just pull it off and lift it out. There we go. While you have the unit open, this would be a good time to clean any loose minerals out of the bottom of the tank. It doesn't need to be sparkling clean, but getting rid of the mineral buildup is always helpful in maintaining the humidifier, and it needs to be done typically twice a year. But essentially you want to get enough minerals out of there. You want to get them out before the heaters bury themselves. So now that we have the cover off, you can see here, we've just got the nuts on top to remove. These don't have to be extremely tight, but it's pretty snug. There's not a whole lot of pressure in a humidifier, and an atmospheric humidifier. It's up to 19-inch water column, which is about half a psi. So loosening up the nuts. Sometimes the nuts might be a little more stubborn, and in that case, you're going to want to use a vice grip on the inside and it's like a backer, and remove them that way. If the nut's really stuck on, you might actually have to use, if it's rusted solid, you're going to have to use an angle grinder to cut the nut in this direction and just remove the nut that way. But generally, they're going to be loose and easy to get out. So loosen up all the nuts. we're going to put the new heaters in. The new heaters, they might come with the nuts on there. They might come with them shipped loose, the larger nut that is. So you want to make sure that you have your new gasket for these heaters on the inside. And then the other thing you want to note too is that if you've got any mineral buildup on the top where that gasket seals, you want to remove any mineral buildup. This is clean right here, so we'll be fine. So we're just going to insert the heaters. Just get all three in there. So now we got the heaters in there. I'm going to kind of hold them like that. And then we're going to use some new nuts. Now this particular brand of black ones, but you should use the new nuts just so that it's going to be easier to get off the next time. So we're just going to place the washers on top. We're going to put all the bolts on hand tight first. I'm going to just kind of get them going first so I don't have to continue to hold all the heaters. Kind of get each one of them going straight. So you want to make sure that the heaters aren't touching the heater next to it and that they're coming out straight and they're not twisting while you're tightening the bolts. See here. Heaters, bolts finger tight. Now I'm just going to use my wrench again and tighten them and hold the heater straight while I do it. You don't have to tighten them that much. You just like I said, you're not trying to seal it against a lot of pressure. You know you're over tightening it if the heaters are twisting inside of the tank, or on the heater terminals are twisting and it starts to make them touch the heater next to it. You know that you've got it a little bit too tight, so you can back it off and retighten it again. Now, some tanks have a baffle inside, so you want to make sure that the heater right here is definitely not twisting, because you'll end up having it twist into the wall, and you don't want it touching the wall. So there we go. Just one last snug check on them all. I want to make sure this one. Now, if your cover looks deteriorated, or if you got a ton of mineral buildup on it that you can't get clean, you're going to want to replace the cover at the same time, the cover gasket. But in general, the cover gasket is reusable. So, place it back in here. Now, the heaters, the way it's oriented here, the overflow is on the top. So, where you got your over temp protector, that should be closest to the overflow when you place it back in the tank. Right here. So once you do that, then you can. You also want to make sure that when you put your cover on, that you're kind of dropping it down and that you're not sliding the gasket off of that lip. So I'm just going to check again here. The gasket's all the way seated around. You can actually, even before you do that, you can do a test like this and just kind of push it all the way on, all the way around. That's good. Drop it back in, drop it straight down on there, and over and slide it. And then you can put the cover clamps back on. Now when you tighten in the cover clamps, just like any other gasket, you want to tighten them evenly. So you're going to get them kind of hand tight first, or a little bit snug first, on the opposite sides. Otherwise you'll tend to have the cover rolled to one side or kind of levered up from one of the clamps, being tighter than the other. So just kind of going opposite, just like you would on a car. Though we don't have a star pattern, it's a plus pattern. Right? Alright, so now I got that one pretty snug. I can go around again. And these are going to be tightened down fairly tight. Once again. You don't want them too loose. You can get to them if they're in the cabinet once it's installed. You can get to them again, but it's a little bit harder to get to them, so you want to make sure that you got them tight down. Now you know that they're tight enough if you can't slide the clamps inside of the slots here. So those are good and tight, and this should be a relatively about the same gap between each of those, between the top clamp and the part that's welded to the tank. You want to make sure that that gap's kind of even all the way around. So I'm just going to go down one more time, make sure, just hand tight. There we go. Now we got that. We can actually replace our jumpers. We're going to put the 2 copper jumpers. Now, some heaters may have a little bit thicker terminals. The ones that I removed from here were number 8 studs. These are number 10 studs, so I'm just going to have to push down a little bit harder on them. There we go. Go. And then we have our other jumper right here. So we're only going to put a nut on one side of the jumper. You want to use a washer too, so you get more contact area between the jumper, the stud and the jumper. So I just put a washer on top there. And a nut. Washer on top of that, a nut. And the last one. So I'm not putting this one, or this one on because with my jumper installed there, that's where I'm going to connect my wire. So I'm just putting these on right now. Tighten those up. Once again, you just want to have these tight. You don't want to over crank them. You might twist the stud off. You want to have them snug so they're not going to come loose. All right, now we're ready to put it back into the tank. So make sure that electrical is not going to block you up. And put it back into the slides. So I don't push it all the way in just yet. We're going to make our hose connections here. So you got your overflow, your drain, and your fill to put back on. Fill hose is right here. I'm just going to hold the hose here. It doesn't have any twist in it. I'm just going to hold it straight. I'm just going to tighten my connection back up. Okay, so now I got my connection, my MPT connection threaded tight. So now I'm just going to tighten my hose clamp again. So I'm going to hand tight here and tighten my hose clamp on my drain. I kind of want to have the clamp oriented like this so it's easier for me to undo it the next time. Get that tight. That tight. Okay, now I'm going to run my electrical wire back in. Put my retaining nut on my conduit. So then once again I'm going to tighten this up. So that's got a nice solid connection there. And then remembering where we had our wires before, they go on to the terminals that I didn't put a nut on. So you can kind of gauge which one goes where by the length of the wire. So here we got one right there and there and there. Of each of these connections here to help make a better connection electrically. And the only thing that you need to note about when you're putting these connections on is that you're not, another difference that you'll see on your unit, on a newer unit, is that we no longer use these insulated, we use non-insulated crimp connectors at the heater terminals, so you just want to make sure that the heater crimp connection is not touching an adjacent phase. So these are 3 different phases, so you just want to make sure there's at least a ½ inch between them. So just tighten these up the rest of the way. After we replace the heater wiring, we need to also replace the low voltage control connection. If you see here, we've got this one plug, which is a 12 pin, and the ribbed side goes to the back. And then we have a 2-pin which connects to the drain valve. There we go. And then you can replace the cover. And then use a short stubby screwdriver tighten it up. One of the last steps here is to replace the heater electrical cover box. So we can just slide that into place. And line up the holes on top there. And then put the nuts back on and tighten them up. Alright, with the heater cover on, now we can slide the tank backwards into place. Back into place. Once we have the tank in place, you can replace the steam hose connection. It goes right here. Once you got that tight on there, we can screw it and tighten the hose clamp, hand tight. Okay, so there's the whole unit installed back into the cabinet. The next step to do would be to unlock the humidifier and let the unit warm up and check for leaks.